Welcome. It's good to see you here. I'm Amber Bock, Superintendent of Schools, and we're joined today by three of our six amazing principals, and I'll introduce them in just a second. But this is Superintendent Spotlight, and it's our new addition to family and community communication. And our goal is to just bring you closer to the topics and issues that are important to families and things people want to know about going on in our classrooms and our schools. And so today I'm super excited. We are officially 16 days, I think, into the school year. So it feels like we've been together a very long time with your children, but actually it's pretty early days. And so we're starting today with a topic of getting your year off to a really good start. Family routines we know about that we've learned over the years from our amazing families that help us make sure that kids are successful and enjoy school. And then also talk about all things homework, which I think as you progress through these years, it can be a really important part of school. So joining me, we have Julia DeGata, who is one of our K-3 principals over at Hastings School, and she's going to represent the work of K-3 principals with her two other colleagues who are also amazing. And then Peter Guellnitz, he's going to make sure that he talks about all things 4, 5, and 6 as the principal over at Mill Pond. And then Brian Callaghan joining us as our high school principal, who's going to talk about 7 to 12. He'll pick up his colleague Jack Foley's information, and we're going to just talk with you about homework. So welcome. I think we'll keep it really informal. It's a conversation, and then what I'm really hopeful in the future is we'll start to get email from people that might say, hey, tell me more about this, or follow up on this as a topic. But what we really want to talk about is what's the inside behind the network stuff that goes on at schools. What are the best ways to get support for your child in homework, or just the tips we can provide. So why don't we roll up the age groups? So Julia, you have our first little munchkins come to you when they're 5 in kindergarten. Do you want to talk a little bit about what homework looks like in K-3?
Yeah, definitely. So in kindergarten to 3rd grade, as a lot of you know as parents yourselves at home, it's all about building routines and starting to foster independence for our little kids. So homework is not meant to be stressful at this age for our students. We really just want our students to learn to have a routine when they come home at night. Kindergarteners don't really receive a lot of homework at the beginning, but it's just building in the routine of having conversations with them, talking about their school day, having experiences with them, teaching them how to be responsible. And then as kids progress from 1st to 2nd to 3rd, they get 10 minutes more as they go up to each grade level. And what homework really looks like is the biggest thing in elementary age is reading. And reading can look many different ways. And I always share with families, you have to remember that for our youngest children, reading isn't how we think of reading. Reading can be looking at pictures, it can be listening to stories, but the number one thing that we really encourage our families to do and our kids to do at home is be involved with literature and text and books. And to set that routine with your kids. So whether you read after snack time when they get home from school or they read before bed, but to really start to build those habits of reading with your children is a huge part of homework at the early ages.
I love that. I think one of the things that I think about, one, emphasizing the literacy, but it doesn't have to be that they have to read to you. I think a really important part of family time is holding on to those books you can read together. So I certainly was a struggling reader, and I know my mother single-handedly rescued me by being the read aloud mom. We always had a book we read at night, and that was one that was kind of like a read aloud that I couldn't read, but that all 3 siblings we could sit and listen. And that really helped me be a book person until my skills evolved. So that's effective as well.
We've done the same in our house. We have a 4th grader who's starting to get actual homework and more work to do, but with our younger 2 children, we kind of consider the reading that we do homework and try to take a little bit of the stigma of the way from homework being this thing that comes at a certain time and is so heavy. Kind of saying that reading is homework and being, and then trying to make homework not such a thing that looks at as, oh, I don't want to have to take that out of my backpack, but it's what we all do. Learning doesn't stop and start with the school bell, and that we're always involved with books and involved with different types of reading and teaching ourselves.
I think too, I mean, you have kids that are grown now. I know my kids were very different, and like one would spend, I mean, there's this time thing. Let's talk about the time a little bit. Because I think one of the big stresses for parents is to try to figure out how much is enough. You say, well, you said 20 minutes, but my child is taking an hour. Like that's like a big component of the homework stress. And I think it's guidance that parents need on that. It's also okay if your child takes longer if they're enjoying it. I think that's okay, right? If like a child likes to spend a lot of extra time on their spelling notes because that's just something they do. But if it's stressful, can you tell me a little bit about like what are the ways that that's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, homework is not, at the elementary ages, it's not meant to be stressful. It's not meant to be teaching our children new content and new information. If anything, it's just a way for them to build healthy habits, to build routine, and to practice. So when it becomes stressful, you want to support them, talk them through that stress. It's a great opportunity to problem solve with your child, but don't push their limits because homework's not meant to push their limits in your house. It's just supposed to create an opportunity for them to review and practice. And it's for families as well to get a lens into the things your child's learning at school. Because we all know when you ask a child, how was your day? They're going to say good. And that's all they're going to tell you. And so homework and reading with kids is a way to get into their little brains and to uncover what they're learning about too.
So there's two pieces about that, and then we'll hop over and we'll kind of start to talk more about 4 to 6 as we kind of explore this a little bit. One of the things I think about is what if my child's doing it wrong or they don't understand it? And I think, that's the other part, and that's true universally, and I'll ask you guys the same questions. Like if you see your child is confused or doesn't know what to do, or they say, I don't know what to do, like what tips do you give people about kind of how to manage that?
Definitely. For reading, a lot of our teachers will send home like tips to help your child sound out a word, tips to help your child learn to read, because in the elementary age, they're really just learning to read. And so we can share tips with families on how to help them, figure out that word or be a word detective when they find something they don't know. We see a lot of that in math because as our students get to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, they do get around 5 to 15 minutes of math a night. And that could be, practicing facts, playing a family math game, or doing like a math review worksheet. And a lot of times parents will ask, I don't want to teach them the wrong way, or I don't want to teach them a different way and confuse them more. If they're stuck, what do I do? We have tons of resources for families. So if families want to learn how to teach them, our curriculum guides are all online, and so families can better understand it themselves. But that's not the goal here. The goal is just for children to practice. If they get stuck, you can coach them in the best way you can, and then write your teacher a note to say, could you help them with this tomorrow, or give me some tips for helping them.
I like that, and that changes over time. I think there's a couple things we'll pull that you can evolve from. As a young parent, you might learn to be like, you can almost journal back and forth with the teacher. Like you put a little note in there and it's simply like, this was so great, it was easy, or hey, we really struggled on this. And you can go back and forth with the teacher and just connect. I think as you evolve over time, the parents are like, what's the role at high school? How do I best make contact if I see struggles and those types of things? And I think the routines you lay early on are supposed to grow over time. So routines, responsibility, lots of conversations, partnering with the teacher with notes.
One thing I'll add to that too, at the elementary level, when our teachers promote this a lot with parents that are wanting to help with homework or assistance, it's open-ended questions, asking the child, how did this look? What did it look like in your class? Or how did the teacher do it? And that way, at least they're bringing up what they learned during the day. It might not be exactly the right way, and it may not be exactly the way that the teacher did show it, but at least the kid's doing the recall, that it's not the parent showing or us showing them, oh, this is how you do it, and then it is a little bit different, and then the kid gets confused. So ask them questions. Let them try and figure it out and explain it as best they can. And if it's not correct, they'll get sorted out in the long run.
And what's beautiful with math, and that if they just try their best and the answer's wrong, a teacher can still kind of read their brain and figure out where that wrong happened and help them work through it. So homework doesn't always have to be right. It's really just the process of building that routine with your child, building their independence, and letting the teacher see the work that they tried to do.
I think that's the singularly most difficult part as a parent. Okay, let's just hyper focus on that one for 1 minute. Okay, it is the most difficult thing in the world when you see your child spell a word wrong. answer a question incorrectly or get the math wrong.
Yep.
Let's just like go there, right? So when we go there, the question is, what's your role? I think we've always messaged that we want to learn from that, and especially K to 3, 4 to 6. And I think by high school, kids move into a different realm of using the kind of communication they have with their teachers. But I think it's okay to write a note and say, I left these incorrect answers because I want you to see them. I hope I stood back. Is that the way I should do it? Because I think then you're letting the teacher know you saw it, and that you purposely left it there so that they could learn from those. But it gives you a role. But if you go in and correct all the work, oftentimes the teacher thinks, "Great, I can move on. They've got this," and that can spiral into areas where the teacher loses a little grip on that practice cycle.
I can vividly recall a situation where I wanted to make the corrections and wanted, thinking, the homework was going to be judged by the teacher, not the assignment, but the homework process was going to be judged. So I wanted to be correct. And I remember getting a note back from the teacher of my daughter, who's in 3rd grade at the time, say it's okay that she gets this wrong, because they could see. And it's not
But you
judgment.
did really well on
I
it,
did
Brian.
really well, yeah.
It's
I
not
did
a
really-
reflection of you. You're a wonderful parent.
Well, it goes through a parent's mind.
Yeah, it
It's
does.
a reflection
Really
on the
hard.
process at home, and that's not it at all.
Right.
There's no judgment at all
Right.
in our teachers, and it took me as a parent to kind of realize that too. But I always felt too at some of those elementary parent-teacher conferences that the feedback was more about me and my wife than it was
no, we have like the
my
parent
child.
panic. I mean, I've cried after a lot of teacher conferences. We all are parents, and those are stressful times.
They
and
are.
you love your child and you want it to go well.
But looking back on it, the most important factor to build good study skills and that independence that you were referencing was to be part of it, not to do it to the point of what we're just talking about, but to be part of it so that you could help support your child, progress and develop.
Yeah, you can sit nearby and read a book.
Yep.
You can do a crossword puzzle. You can read the paper. You can do your own work. I mean, many parents still are doing work at night themselves. And I think it's almost, you worry that I've always struggled with this, where you're neglecting your kids because you're doing stuff you got to get done at home at night. But if you build that into time, you do that together, I'm sure you guys, professionally, I know you all work at home at night. So doing your work with your children models as well.
And letting them know that you're there to review something.
Yeah.
I have an 8th grader now, and when my middle child was in high school, early years of high school, he would be asking me, much like my 8th grader does now, can you look at this before they put it in their folder and say that it's
I
done?
think that's great.
And I can have reframing questions or double check this or some of that guidance that I think is very helpful, because it does keep them to be an independent learner, and but they're using you as a necessary safety net if they need you to.
So developmentally, these are just great tips. I love this time to talk with you guys. Developmentally, you get little roadblocks. One of the roadblocks I know after years of this work is outright refusal by little people, right? Because they don't understand what their role is. So if you get into an outright refusal, then you want to partner with the teacher to put a system in place to do just little bits over time. And I think you definitely need to reach out and do partnership with the teacher then, because that's a part where you need like a little strategy between the adults without it becoming a battle to build in little bits. And I think teachers are very skilled at giving you little pieces if you ask to partner with them. And that becomes really helpful. So you can kind of have like the things you might run into in K3 is refusal or a lot of crying sometimes, like if you look at the problem issues. Mostly it's as a family you're trying to figure it out, So then we roll up to 4 to 6, and I think then you hit the oh my gosh, there's more than one teacher and we have more volume. And I think this sense of it's bigger and more important. So tell me how these strategies grow. Peter, take us through kind of your tips.
I think one of the things we center on, especially in our 4th grade, and it scales up through the 6th grade, is the responsibility piece. And I think really helping the students understand that it is their responsibility to be the ones who are I guess, initiating the work, and that they should be coming home and they should be having conversations and they should be taking out their folders and they should really start to think of the executive functioning piece of time management. And I mean, we know, I know schedules these days of our kids after school are crazy. And sometimes the after school schedule actually feels more hectic than during the day.
Are you talking about your life, Peter?
Yes,
I
I
know.
can take a little time here
I do
to
know
go
what
down
Peter's
that
life
road.
is like. He's in the
But other
thick of
people
it
as
right
well,
now.
as I hear, not just me, but other people as well definitely schedule their families. And so I think finding that right time, and I know the nice thing about Mill Pond actually is the actually early end time in the day. And a lot of our students talk about that they go home, they get off the bus, they have a snack, and then they do their homework from like 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, because then at 4 o'clock is when practices start. 5 o'clock they have practice 6 o'clock, and and they get into dinner time, and then sometimes practices go very late. So they actually find that 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock time frame is a good time. Oftentimes though, it's an unstructured time when there aren't family there. So the families that kind of put in those habits of when you come home, you take your agenda out. I've heard of families that have like agenda spots where they literally, the kid takes out and puts their agenda at a certain spot. When they come home, they take it out of their backpack, they put it down, and they open it up and they look through and they start their work. They may not finish it, but they at least kind of initiate it, and then that allows the conversation throughout the afternoon and into the evening for the child to be ultimately responsible for kind of getting that initial, I guess, kind of that instigation of the homework process.
So you have a couple key pieces I want to pull out there and highlight. One is growing the sense of routine and responsibility for it. But there's a different role for parents, which is one, sometimes you have to help them scaffold the homework through breaks in their day, and adding the routine of having the so there is an assignment book.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Right.
Like, it's just an important thing to
Right.
know. And if you feel like, I know as a parent, I had one child who just could not get all the assignments in there. And so as a parent, I'd be like, I didn't even know he had this quiz he missed, or, So I think from that standpoint, you want to say, okay, what's the checking structure, right? So, if you need a teacher to make sure that they looked at, a lot of the teachers I know at Mill Pond, they'll initial that they saw it, so that if you needed a little embedded structure to be reassured that everything's there, that's helpful. One of the other things you said is like, you might start it right away, but one of the other tips we used to use was do the tough one first. Like, don't leave reading till the end if that's the thing that bogs you down, or math, move it to the front and get it done early, are some of the things. Some people literally end up doing their homework in the car, on the bus, all those types of things.
Especially in a very common thing that starts a lot in the 4th through 6th grade and definitely continues into middle school and high school is kind of longer range goals, right? Or longer range projects or homework that's due on Friday and you get it on Monday or Tuesday. And so oftentimes asking your children a little bit more about, what's coming up, not just what's your homework tonight, because tonight, it's Monday, it's Tuesday night, there is no homework, right? There's nothing that's due the next day. Yeah. But there is the project that's due at the end on Friday, or the spelling quiz that's coming up on Friday, or the assignment that's coming up that is a routine and a ritual that they should be, kind of pecking away at throughout the week.
That's an interesting bridge to what starts to happen in high school, and I like that you're pulling that point out. So a role for a parent changes then to a certain extent. Some kids automatically know how to scaffold out their week, but if they don't, you probably need to model for them kind of with that metacognitive where you talk out loud. Here's what I might try with my own week. So you're showing them how to pace it out and map it out. Is it? I would say I'm asking if it's okay, but I'm going to say as superintendent, it is okay if you help your child map out their week and provide some structure for them. Like, don't be afraid to set structures for your child if they feel a little overwhelmed by that adjustment. Your adult support to be like, this is how we're going to do it. Right. We're going to do it this way for 2 weeks.
Okay. I mean, we have an example that I just talked with a parent the other day who was saying that they found on Amazon, there's all those different, any whiteboard you can imagine now is on Amazon, but they have like a week-long whiteboard basically, and it's a sticky one, so it sticks to something, so they have it on like the child's bookcase in their room or something, or it's somewhere wherever their workspace is, and the child transfers their agenda to this whiteboard, so it's all on there, and so they can actually write down, oh, this is due on Friday, so that it's there in front of them all the time. And that actual process of the transfer of information, the parent said, is great for the kid, because the child does forget. They forget to mention, they forgot about, the day was so busy, they had soccer practice and they had this, they forgot about the spelling quiz that was coming up on Monday. But when they actually transferred the information from one spot to another, that was their routine when they came home. So they
Interesting.
kind of initiated this routine of, you don't have to do your homework at 3 o'clock when you get home, but you need to kind of do that process of transferring it over. And that way, now the child's thinking about it too, and the child is taking responsibility for it, and it's up for everybody to see.
And we can
So-
let them work where they're comfortable, which is, it's okay for them to work in the middle of the busy kitchen if they're getting the work done. It's okay for them to work, wherever they're accomplishing the work. I think that's adult judgment. If your child is leaving the TV on, or they're doing 10 things, or they're on their computer, and in these upper grades, they're gaming, they're IMing, they're doing everything, and then they're trying to squeeze the homework in between all of that stuff. And we'll talk about that because it requires a different type of maintenance sometimes to help them kind of navigate that. One other thing I was going to ask you, there's 2 things that come into play when you hit 4 to 6 that roll up is Google Classroom. And I think that's where a lot of the assignment work lives, but parents might not be in there. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know Brian will probably emphasize
Yeah.
that as well.
Definitely, as we move into our 5th and 6th grade, and especially in our 6th grade, technology use around organizational and executive functioning becomes really primary, and kind of the way that teachers are communicating. And there's so many resources, and I mean, it's amazing now that we've been using Google Classroom for a number of years, the things that exist on there for students to be able to access
Yeah.
it, and for parents, especially at the 6th grade level, to be able to access to support their learning and help them, and as well a way to organize assignments. And so what we encourage for our 6th grade, they talked about it at our open house, and it's really a big piece, is getting that conversation and getting used to looking at it with your child. Like, especially at 6th grade, getting them used to, it's not a private world that has to be left alone, and it's just for them to communicate with, as much as they may want it to be, and they feel it's their iPad. It's not theirs, it's Westborough's, and we want them to use it as a learning tool
Yes.
with their families. And so we encourage them, and if parents ever request, we try and share Google codes for parents to be able to get in so they can look at the assignments. Sometimes it's tricky to navigate, but most of the kids will be able to demonstrate it pretty easily. So we really try and open that door up. And again, not so you can monitor, but more so you can have that open family conversation around what's going on, what are you doing in school. It gives you dinner, dinner table fodder to talk about. And
Right.
how's that project going that you showed me last week?
I definitely think that if I were raising both kids now and they were using Google platform, I would expect to be in there as a parent. Like, that's not secret to them. That's the work they own at school, the project postings, the information from faculty, the exchanges of due dates and project outlines. It's also interesting. I just want to say, like, whenever I get in the Google Classroom, I'm like, this is so cool. Like, you see everything that they're doing, the project outlines, the communication. I mean, it's exciting to see. And I think if you don't see that layer of your child's school experience, you're not seeing the level of preparation and work that faculty are bringing to engaging with your student. And I think that's super helpful.
There are some really amazing resources that the teachers put on there, especially
Yeah.
now, again, since it's been going for years, that, I mean, that a parent would probably find interesting to just
Yeah.
learn on their own.
Yeah,
Like, it's
no, it's
amazing. Like, there's some
fascinating.
videos that the teachers make and
Yeah.
they put on there
Yeah.
that you're like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's how that works.
I think it's fascinating. I think you should talk with your child about it and build that into the culture. And we're going to talk about this at the end when we switch to like successful family routines. That like your child's technology is just like tying their shoes. You own it. You need to interact on it, and we need to talk a little bit about that. So those are great highlights. I'm going to keep us moving just a little bit, and I'm going to roll up there. So we see this development. You haven't talked about this, but we might talk about it as a group, but I want to remember to talk about how we move into group learning then and group projects, which can also be complex as people start worrying about how it impacts grades and things and their child's responsibility or the complexity of having to work with teams that might be hard. But that's just part of what we're developing in students. I do want to hit on that. Because it can be a way for kids to confuse you, like, well, that job wasn't mine, it was John's, and it was like, you got to learn to navigate all that as well. So after the close of 6th grade, those teams, I think, do a lot of homework and good project-based learning as well. And then they've already had multiple teachers, and then they roll up into the kind of the 7 through 12 experience. So you get the big pile of, it goes into grading phase, because I think the big shift is now you're going to go into letter grades, and that feels like that and homework become this tension of anxiety. So I'm really wanting you to share how we handle all
there's
that.
a lot to share. So I'll try to be concise. talking to Mr. Foley and seeing his handbook and some of the team guidelines, it's clear that through 7 through 12, homework is treated as kind of a meaningful assessment. And what that basically means in our terms is like we want it to be an extension of the lesson that they just had in school and possibly preview the next day's lesson. Like that's really the goal. It's not, in math, sometimes it's practice, but a lot of the practice gets done now in the math class because we want to be able to have the teacher observe
See how
if the
they're
practice
working.
is
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
done correctly or not and make adjustments right there. But for the most part, homework is seen as something that's supposed to be purposeful and meaningful around a learning objective or a specific lesson or project that Peter had mentioned. In terms of amount, roughly beginning in 7th grade, it is approximately 30 minutes per class. And not every class assigns homework every single night. So it does vary. So at the high school level, there's 7 classes that students take. I think it's around that same amount for the middle school. But not every class has, obviously, homework on a given night. It should never be more than 2 hours, ever. Now that we know it does in talking to kids and some parents, it takes longer than 2 hours. In large part, what our research shows in tracking this specifically with students at various levels, they do get distracted by the technology. They're, or perhaps interrupted by an activity that's, not a school activity, could be work, could be, some type of practice.
Gaming, you might as well throw that out there.
Gaming and other technology pieces.
Yeah.
But we think that that's still a fair amount. We know that there can be challenges with that with some students. But we also know that our teachers and our students, and of course parents as well, if there's good communication about what didn't get done and maybe how they can make it up, there's a great deal of flexibility that I think goes into looking at that homework. Not every piece of homework is graded. I'm not sure if parents realize that, but again, if it's about preparing for the next lesson, maybe it's the effort and the engagement that the student brings or doesn't bring the next day that is assessed. And certainly that's based on whether or not they prepared properly at home, but sometimes homework is not graded. And that sometimes is a misunderstanding by some parents. But for example, if you're required to read, 8 pages of a chapter in English because you're having a reading quiz the next day, obviously there's a direct cause to that reading quiz grade.
Right.
Or if there's going to be a class discussion 2 days later, having to keep up and keep pace with that reading guide is certainly important. But overall, I think that we continue to explore ways in which students and parents and teachers can work together on homework assignments. We kind of joked a little bit earlier about notes being sent back and forth. That still happens today.
Yeah.
That this does still happen today. The note is written a little bit differently in the sense of, it's, asking for, potentially help or just explaining something. But I can tell you that teachers really appreciate understanding why a student was unable to, complete an assignment. And that flexibility that I mentioned earlier is something that comes into play once we get that information.
And so many pieces here to think
Yeah.
about, because I think what happens is, again, you also have people that have a range of expectations, and so we're trying to create a bell curve of opportunity. You have some families that are like, there's not enough homework, my kid needs more, and other people like, my kid is buried. So in any given structure, we're going to create variability. We're going to hit that middle norm of what we think is enough, and then we're going to need families to give us feedback and to work with us. So they also vary some of the homework, again, by complexity level, need, all of that. But in general, you're always trying to kind of find what people need, and you need families and kids to help you norm that. I think the big fear as a parent is that proverbial hole. Like if they dig a hole and then their grade goes down and they can't get out, like how do you, so you think then parents can and should email the teacher and just check in, like, hey, do you know that they seem to be struggling with this, or how are they doing?
Yeah, that happens as often as it's needed. We definitely have plenty of challenges that students have at home that get in the way of them completing a very basic, simple assignment. And if it's an ongoing issue, we definitely want the parents to reach out early on in the process so that we can intervene and put some good practices in place, or work collaboratively with the parent and the student to figure out how we're going to address whatever issue's happening. But there is a strong bit of collaboration on the family front.
Add a piece onto that too, and it's something we start encouraging at Mill Pond, and I know it continues its way up, is that conversation not just between the parent and the teacher, but the conversation between the student and the teacher as well, and kind of really having the student advocate for themselves and say, all right, because oftentimes just that fact of them talking it out with the teacher, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I guess I could do it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden those revelations start to all of a sudden come to mind just as they start talking to the teacher.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I think oftentimes encouraging the child to say, go talk to teacher so-and-so about this project and how you could scaffold it out and get things done at different times.
And you can email the teacher and say, hey, I've asked Sarah to go see you. If she avoids that, please capture her
Right.
kindly. And that's the way you partner. Like,
Right.
it does, I think those like small pieces really, like, so-and-so really resisted homework last night. Can you maybe check in and help them and give them a strategy?
I think you said in terms of encourage your child to go, that is probably the single most significant role a parent can play at the high school level, and probably even at the middle school, although I'm not there to see it. I do see it at the high school. When a parent is there to encourage their child to take that responsibility or ownership of their learning or their communication, incredibly positive things can impact. It can be quite impactful. And again, not to say that when a parent reaches out, it's less impactful, but we get there quicker when the student is owning, their own communication. So when parents can be the CEO, Chief Encouragement Officer, that's when good things can happen.
And that starts in third grade to
It
teach,
does.
second grade to teach a child to say, tomorrow when you go to school, tell, Mr. Callaghan that you had trouble on number 2. And they'll help you with that problem. And so we want to encourage that from elementary as well.
And what parents don't see is the teachers love working on that number 2.
Yeah.
They
Or when the
absol-
child writes a note to the teacher
Sure.
and say, will you help me tomorrow on this? Like, that makes a teacher's day.
That personalized
Yeah.
instruction and learning, and not to the detriment of the 20 other plus students in the class, but the teacher really wants to do that kind of work. So when they know about it and they do it with great skill and passion, again, it's quite impactful.
And we can make some modifications. You can work on that. One of the things you can do is if you feel like you have an avoider, if you have a child who's an avoider who says, sure, I'll talk to the teacher, and then it never happens, which is a part that can lead into a cycle where they feel like the teacher didn't, as a parent, you're left in a vacuum, right? If you think, well, I thought they were going to talk to them, but we don't know if they did or didn't. And then you get into a cycle where you feel left out of what's really happening, but you don't see a shift of gaining control over what's going on. That's really when you should email. You can also email the guidance person and
The
say, can you
school
swing up
counselor.
and check on this? You can talk with the school counselor. You can email the teacher and just be like, I've been trying to send Sarah to see you. Can you scoop her up a little bit and, break down that anxiety she has about, talking to you about it.
And that's work our school counselors are really good
Yeah,
at.
they are.
They're
They
really,
are.
really skilled in doing that type
Yeah.
of work. One other piece I wanted to add about Google Classroom,
Yeah.
relative to parents. Many of our parents at many of our teachers at the middle school, and some at the high school, not as many as the middle school, but we're working on that. They do have the capability of inviting parents into the Google Classroom. I know more and more of our teachers at the high school are inviting those parents. So if a parent is interested in joining their child's Google Classroom to see and monitor and help encourage, as we were saying, reach out to the teacher to ask if they could be invited to that
Good.
Google
I
Classroom.
like that. That's
You
a
won't
good
have
one.
editing privileges, obviously, but they can see all the wonderful things that is happening.
And they
through
might
that
start
portal.
participating. I mean, some of the stuff's amazing. I think one of the other pieces I'm excited this year, which is we also have structures for help by the time you roll up into 7 through 12. This year, you're opening a new branch of support. You're going to start your Ranger Homework and Academic Support Center coming in October. I know that the person you've hired is starting to organize that. Can you talk just a little bit about that structure? You're going to send more to parents on it, but
Yeah, as soon as we have it really thoughtfully planned,
Yeah.
we have some great ideas, but it just hasn't been enacted yet.
Yeah.
We will send that out to parents. We are looking to establish an academic tutor center that will be staffed, during the day for students to be able to access, to help organize, to help reinforce, to perhaps get some help with math or science or an essay writing or read aloud, whatever it is that the student needs. We're hoping that we can have the center available to provide that support
Yeah, I
in
think it's
conjunction with what's happening in the classroom. So,
Exactly.
exactly. It's tutor, student, teacher, school counselor, parent, perhaps. So
Yeah,
it
it's
really
just another resource. It's a layer. You've got, almost 1,200
right
kids up
on
there.
site
So,
too. Yeah.
right. So
in the
there's someone
school.
on site you can say, like, I need help on this quiz. I feel like I'm losing ground. It's just good to have multiple resources. And so I think it's one that there's also homework support. There's a homework club that's over at Gibbons. So there are structures. If you have questions about that as a parent, just try to reach out to your child's guidance person and get information. All things good. I mean, I think the things I hear is partner with the teacher, don't be afraid to. Let your child do the work, but create some routines and structures. And ask good questions and just stay after it. We really want it to be. And if homework needs to be modified across that bell curve of, I want more homework, I want less, you just really, we can't norm that independently. We need some help from you to do that.
One other piece I just wanted to add is that unlike when we were in school, Amber, you and I,
I know,
maybe
yeah, those youngins over here.
the productivity in the classroom is so much higher than it was years ago.
yeah.
What we are asking our students to do and what they are doing can be exhausting.
Yeah.
It can. So when we talk about not every class gives homework and it should be around 30 to maybe 45 minutes a night, it's taking into account how much we have had them work for us, the effort they've put forth and the productivity that they've exhibited.
I agree.
The 54 minutes at the high school is quite structured and it's quite involved and engaged.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
so
as a frequent visitor, I agree.
Yeah.
Across all of our classrooms, I mean, they're busy and active, and there's a reason why your kids come home. They might not show physical fatigue, but they have emotional, mental fatigue.
Yeah,
I mean, we
they do.
certainly know that that's something that
That's right.
I think staff has as well. It's a very active intellectual process all day, and so it's important to kind of take breaks.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. I think one example I heard someone mention the other day is a lot of adults go to work and oftentimes work with a handful of other people or a bunch of other people, but your kid's going to school and interacting with hundreds of other people for 7 hours straight. So if you were to imagine yourself going somewhere where you're around hundreds of people and all types of social stimulus all day long, plus learning academically, you would come home tired too. So kids are tired.
So let's use that as a springboard. We're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to wrap the show, and you guys have done great. Let's talk a little bit about the things that help families be successful. I mean, raising families is beautiful, fun. Like, if I could kick my kids back to 5 and do every moment of it, I would do it again in a second. I would go right back. So it's supposed to be all the challenges and all the joys, but we want families to be happy, to thrive. You come home, you're tired. What are some of the things we know work? Like, what are the types of things that make for successful family time, not stressful evenings, tips and tricks? What do you guys got?
First and foremost, I think it's patience. I really do. I think
I don't have any of that left.
It's a loss.
I'm not even nice to my husband by the time I come home. Like, leave me alone.
I know we have to work hard at it for sure because life is so fast and there's so much going on. But the more we can be, patient and present in the moment, to listen and to have good communication and good opportunities to connect.
I agree.
Like that, to me, those are the top three: patience, create opportunities to connect, and and really communicate well with each other.
Yeah. Other ones you guys have?
Yeah, I think finding time to be together, and it could be 5 minutes on one night, and then I get that mom guilt all the time if I only sat down for 5 minutes tonight with my child. But life is busy and you get that, but knowing that, the next night it might be that 30 minutes that you're spending together, and that can look different, the time that you spend together. Some other traditions I've seen families do that are a lot of fun, just to get our children talking about their day, thinking about their day, reflecting on their day, when they're having dinner or ice cream or taking that walk around the block, like share a glow and grow, like share something that was really awesome today and share something that might have been harder for you today. And that just like opens the door to having meaningful conversations with your kids and pushing them to kind of think about
We
their
call
day.
that roses and thorns.
Yep, I've heard
Roses,
roses
I
and
like that
thorns,
too.
glow and grow, all the different little tricks.
Rob
You had
Evans.
me at ice cream.
I know, I love that. Rob
That's a
Evans,
good
a
one.
school psychologist who I adore, he used to say, kids need high doses of low quality time.
Yeah.
And I just love that because it's so
Yeah.
true. It doesn't, you
Yeah.
don't have to do something inventive. You just need to be together. It might be you're all sitting and watching a common TV show you like. It might be that I know people struggle with, statistically, family dinner has gigantic positive impact on mental health and family togetherness and kids' performance. We can't all manage that. You've got sports teams and dinner engagements. I have trouble Neil and I getting on the same page for dinner. So it's okay. I think it's important to also say, like, it's okay, but you can have other versions. It can be that you might just sit down at the end of the night to do end of the day 15 minutes before the first person peels off to bed to be like, what's up for tomorrow and what were the highs and lows of today? Or even if it's like you walk the dog around the block and you decide to all go together, the little things do add up, and I think create connectedness. And you don't always have to grill your kid on their day. You might want to unpack your own and show them what your own day was like and how, like that metacognitive piece. Like, my day was so hard today that I just went outside and I sat for 5 minutes and just kind of got outside my office. And you're modeling those strategies and you're just kind of showing them that it's not like you're invincible. I think they all think that we're invincible.
Yeah, I think too, like you said, sometimes kids don't want to share, and that's okay. Sometimes days were hard, and sometimes they don't want to share just because they're lazy.
tired.
So I think the one thing we've seen really work well is find that one little piece of nugget of information. Like, instead of just saying how was your day, if you know they're working on a science project, or you know that they're involved in reading a certain book at a certain class, like, how did you feel about that book? Kind of giving them a more, or if you see a picture come through on Parent Square or something like that, and there's something that you ask that question that kind of gets them talking about one little piece, even if it's not their whole day, just to get them talking about it, and then all of a sudden the waterfall's open, and now they're telling you all the types of other things, and kind of being able to get that one little foot in the door.
And with little kids, that can happen through play, because kids go home at the elementary age and they're still playing. So play with your kid.
Right.
Sure.
Don't go into their playroom or their play area and sit down and do Legos with them, or go throw a ball with them, and that conversation will come up through play.
I think that's a huge strategy all the way through high school, which is,
It
they
is.
always say when you're driving with your kid, you can actually talk with them.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
I would
that's
think just
huge.
one quick thing too is, so if all those other activities that take up our time are seen as serious in our lives, then something like family connection should be treated with the same level of seriousness. So be intentional and be scheduling it, I think is important too.
Even if you're like, you think about how hard people are trying to keep their own fitness and their own balance, you can sometimes add a kid in with you, or divide and
Bike
conquer.
rides. And,
So
I come into school pretty early in the morning, and there are families waiting, to get picked up on the bus for Mill Pond, and they are out in the driveway talking with one another. So even waiting at the bus stop, I see a lot of people waiting with their children at bus stop, but not all of them are talking with one another. But this morning I saw a father and a daughter playing badminton in their driveway,
While they're
which I
waiting
thought
for
was
the
pretty
bus.
cool. So.
So these
Schedule.
are great ideas. I think one of the last pieces we'll talk about is, I wanted to cover technology, but I'm going to roll it to another talk time, because I think setting appropriate guidelines and not being afraid to manage technology in your family for your kids is an important part. But coming up, we will, in the future, we're going to have a whole series done through Parent Square, working with Westborough Connects and Rotary and us, and they're going to do a whole series on Screenagers, which is 3 movies across the span of the year, which are incredibly good. So we're going to do a whole show on that to highlight it. We're going to finish up here today. I just want to thank you guys. I just want to say I could talk to you all day. To the stories you can tell and the things you have going on, but I think, reach out, connect, those are our messages. They're always better to have people ask. I think the other part of that is that we have shows coming up. If you want topics covered, you can always email me and ask. And I also think we'll do the Screenagers. I'm going to do a show coming up on all things literacy assessment K-6, which is exciting. So, we've got things that are going to be happening, but we hope this is helpful for you as a family to get a little snapshot into life in the schools. So thank you, take care, and we'll see you for the next show.